Open up! Last chance, open the door!
You've just seen it. The chaos of an early morning raid, police in riot gear shouting, "Open the door," before smashing their way into a nondescript industrial unit. But this wasn't just any bust. Behind those walls was one of the biggest drug smuggling operations Europe has ever seen, hiding £7 billion worth of drugs in shipments of garlic and onions. From the outside, it looked like a standard import business, crates of food, customs paperwork in order, delivery trucks coming and going. But inside those vegetables, layers of shrink-wrapped cocaine, meth, and ketamine, all meticulously disguised and distributed through a web of shell companies, encrypted chats, and corrupt freight handlers. This wasn't some backstreet gang. This was a multinational criminal syndicate with links to organized crime in the Netherlands, Spain, and the UK. It took months of surveillance, intercepted messages, and undercover work to bring them down. What started with a tip-off in a London warehouse would end in dawn raids across Europe, dozens of arrests, and one of the most jaw-dropping drug busts in UK history. This is the story of the £7 billion garlic and onion drug empire, and the operation that crushed it. It started with a smell. In September 2023, workers at a logistics hub in East London noticed something strange. A delivery of garlic and onions imported from Spain had an overpowering chemical odor. One of the warehouse employees, who used to work in border security, flagged it to his supervisor. "It doesn't smell like garlic," he said. "It smells like something else, like ammonia." The supervisor reported the concern to the Port of Tilbury authorities, and within 48 hours, a low-level customs investigation was underway. Officials ran random scans of the cargo, but nothing popped. However, one officer, suspicious of inconsistencies in the shipping manifest, dug deeper. The stated weight of the cargo was too heavy for onions and garlic alone. That triggered a second, more thorough inspection, and that's when things changed. Tucked behind rows of vegetables were vacuum-sealed plastic packets, hundreds of them hidden in custom-made panels in the crates. Initial tests confirmed the presence of high-purity cocaine, over £20 million worth in just one container. But this was no one-off. It matched two previous suspicious shipments, one in Belgium, another in Rotterdam. Both were also marked as Spanish vegetable exports. Investigators now had reason to believe this was part of a larger, coordinated operation, potentially one of the biggest in Europe. The UK's National Crime Agency, NCA, Europol, and Spanish authorities launched a joint operation. They codenamed it Operation Allium, a nod to the garlic genus. Undercover officers infiltrated the port's logistics network, while cyber teams began decrypting messages from a secure messaging app known to be used by criminal groups, Exclu Messenger, the successor to now defunct EncroChat. Meanwhile, surveillance teams tailed suspected individuals connected to the shipping company. One man, a 44-year-old with known links to the Cartel, had been flying frequently between Malaga and Manchester. Another, operating from a flat in Birmingham, had previous arrests for cocaine trafficking, but was released due to insufficient evidence. But the true mastermind remained in the shadows, someone the agencies simply referred to as El Sapo, Spanish for the Toad. A ghost figure, no photos, no traceable phone, just whispers in encrypted chats and third-party couriers. Over the next 2 months, Operation Allium would escalate into one of the largest cross-border drug investigations in European history. The garlic and onion crates were just the beginning. Luis T, or El Sapo, had no idea the hijacking had been staged. From the moment the Romanian crew unloaded what they believed was a jackpot, every move they made was monitored. Spanish undercover teams had eyes on their safe house, and UK cyber agents tracked burner phones as they pinged nearby towers. The NCA and Europol knew they had one shot to bring this down cleanly, before anyone in the network suspected a setup. Luis remained cautious. He rarely left the villa. Supplies were delivered by couriers who never entered the property. Inside, there was a panic room, encrypted servers, and satellite internet. He operated like a ghost, managing logistics through middlemen and accessing his networks via dark web portals and VPN masks. But one of his most trusted lieutenants made a mistake. 2 days after the hijack, a man named Cristian Voitu, a Romanian national and one of the hijackers, attempted to convert £120,000 worth of crypto into cash through a third-party exchange in Malaga. The exchange was under Spanish watch. Agents intercepted the transfer and quietly traced the device he used. They tracked it back to the villa. This was the break they needed. Spanish Guardia Civil activated an arrest warrant and launched a coordinated operation with the help of the UK NCA and Dutch police. But they couldn't risk a firefight. The villa had reinforced doors, CCTV, and possibly armed guards. That's when they turned to a tactical unit known as UEI, Spain's elite anti-terror force. At 4:45 a.m. on November 18th, armored trucks rolled into the hills near Marbella. Drones buzzed overhead, and mobile jammers blocked all phone and satellite signals in the area. The moment came fast. Flashbangs shattered the villa's silence. Tactical units stormed the compound, breaching from multiple entry points. The front door held up briefly, but not for long. Luis T., shirtless and barefoot, was found trying to access the panic room with a hard drive in hand. He didn't resist. On site, agents recovered dozens of encrypted devices, 500,000 euros in cash, gold bars, and a pistol. But most importantly, they found a paper ledger hidden inside a Bible. It contained handwritten notes, dates, ports, and code names, cross-referenced with several garlic shipments that had passed through Tilbury, Antwerp, and Rotterdam. The scale of the operation was suddenly real. This wasn't about a few lucky shipments. It was a network that had moved tons of narcotics, mostly cocaine and meth, across Europe for over 3 years. The drugs had come in from Colombia, Ecuador, and Mexico, shipped to Spain under the cover of fresh produce, routed through warehouses like the one in Murcia, then sent via truck or rail to the UK, Belgium, and the Netherlands, and every part of it had been touched by El Sapo's signature. Back in London, NCA officers began raiding addresses connected to the shell companies listed in the Bible ledger. Dozens of arrests followed. From small-time port workers to high-level brokers, the dominoes began to fall. But there was one thing investigators didn't expect. Inside a hidden compartment in Luis T.'s villa, they found photographs, dozens of them. Surveillance shots of police officers, their families, even journalists. El Sapo hadn't just been running a business, he had been watching the people trying to bring him down, and it was personal. The takedown had stopped something massive, but it had also revealed just how deep this network went, and how many layers were still in place. With El Sapo in custody, and over 30 arrests made across the UK and Spain, investigators now focused on mapping the inner workings of the garlic and onion empire. And what they uncovered was a masterclass in organized crime logistics. It all revolved around a single idea: camouflage in plain sight. The syndicate had created an entire infrastructure that mimicked a legitimate European food distribution network. On the surface, they were exporters of Spanish produce, primarily garlic and onions, selling to wholesalers in the UK and Benelux countries. But the product was never the point. The cargo was the cover. Shell companies were set up in Spain, the Netherlands, and even Ireland. Most were registered under the names of retired citizens, homeless individuals, or unwitting foreigners. These companies leased industrial warehouses, bought used refrigerated trucks, and even paid for food safety inspections to keep up appearances. The drugs were packed inside the shipments at rural farms in Murcia and Alicante. Criminal chemists used odorless packaging and lead-lined compartments to shield the drugs from detection. Each crate was then filled with real garlic or onions to complete the illusion. These weren't sloppy efforts. They were engineered to pass inspections. When a shipment arrived at the port of Tilbury or Rotterdam, the paperwork looked perfect. Customs officials rarely raised suspicion. After all, importing garlic wasn't headline material. The food even ended up real distribution centers before the drugs were quietly extracted and replaced with dummy loads. But the genius of the system wasn't just in its concealment, it was in its decentralization. Every node of the network operated independently. The people packing the drugs in Spain didn't know who sold it in the UK. The lorry drivers were contractors who were paid to not ask questions. The encryption software used by the coordinators was developed by ex-cybersecurity students in the Netherlands and hosted on offshore servers in the Seychelles. Dirty money flowed out through shell export invoices, luxury car resales, and cryptocurrency mixes. Some funds were routed through Dubai and returned to Europe via fake import contracts for Mediterranean spices. According to Europol's estimate, the group had trafficked over 80 metric tons of drugs into the UK and EU over the past 3 years, valued at over £7 billion. What finally brought the empire down wasn't just the drugs, it was the arrogance. One of the companies, Alimentos del Sur, had begun over-exporting, shipping 5 to 10 times more garlic than market demand. That discrepancy triggered an EU-wide financial audit. Investigators cross-checked transport manifests with supermarket stock data and noticed a pattern. Certain garlic shipments always coincided with spikes in street-level cocaine seizures. The syndicate had grown too fast, and in doing so they attracted attention. Now, as detectives pored over recovered ledgers and decrypted chats, they began seeing names that hadn't appeared in any databases before. Accountants, lawyers, customs officials, people in powerful positions who may have enabled the trade. What started as a smelly crate of garlic in East London had now turned into a continent-wide investigation, with layers that reached boardrooms, ports, and possibly government offices. The final stage of Operation Allium was just beginning. By the end of November 2023, Operation Allium shifted gears. With El Sapo behind bars in Spain, the UK's NCA, Europol, and multiple domestic agencies across Europe launched simultaneous raids to dismantle the rest of the organization's infrastructure. It was no longer about catching drug runners, it was about uprooting the entire criminal web. Early morning raids lit up cities across Europe. In Manchester, police stormed a suburban estate and arrested a 38-year-old British man known to be the group's UK logistics coordinator. In his garage, they found crate schematics and invoices marked Alimentos del Sur, along with notes referencing UK cities and port codes. A second arrest in Leeds brought down an accountant who had processed over £2 million through a Polish shell company in just 8 months. In Amsterdam, Dutch authorities executed 4 warrants. One of them led to the arrest of a man suspected of laundering crypto through mixer services. Agents seized 3 laptops, multiple smartphones, and cold wallets holding nearly 3.5 million euros in Bitcoin and Monero. Another raid uncovered fake import-export documentation used to move agricultural goods from Spain through Antwerp, all backdated and digitally signed using spoofed credentials. The scale of the syndicate's reach was staggering. In Ireland, a customs official was suspended after admitting under interrogation that he had flagged certain garlic shipments to pass through priority lanes. In return, he'd received anonymous crypto payments and cash envelopes left in a hollowed-out tree stump in a Dublin park. Even in Germany, authorities raided a freight forwarding firm in Hamburg. The firm had unknowingly routed over 15 shipments for the garlic front, each containing hidden narcotics. The company wasn't involved knowingly, but it revealed how easily legitimate infrastructure could be exploited. Meanwhile, Spanish officials released drone footage of a second warehouse in Valencia. This one was even more advanced, a full conveyor system, loading docks, and even employees with fake work permits. Every box had a digital QR code and was wrapped in plastic film. From the outside, it looked like a high-end food export business, but inside the boxes, more bricks of white powder, shrink-wrapped and disguised inside hollow garlic bulbs. By the first week of December, over 60 individuals had been arrested across 6 countries. Interpol issued red notices for 12 more, including a suspected liaison for South American cartels. One of them, a Colombian known as Mateo El Fantasma, was believed to be the original broker who connected El Sapo to his suppliers. But even with the arrests, the full scale of the operation was hard to pin down. Some containers were still missing. Customs officials admitted that many shipments had already been cleared and distributed before Operation Allium began. Intelligence reports suggested that parts of the network were already regrouping. New companies registered in Morocco, whispers of routes through the Balkans. Still, the blow was devastating. Authorities had struck a £1 billion drug syndicate at its core, arrested its leadership, and seized hundreds of millions in assets. In a world where encrypted communication had made drug trafficking nearly invisible, Operation Allium proved that patience, coordination, and international pressure could still expose even the most well-hidden criminal empires. And in the aftermath, there was a shift. Ports across Europe tightened inspections, garlic and onion imports dropped sharply, and dozens of companies found themselves under sudden scrutiny. What had once been an odorless smokescreen was now an international scandal. But the final blow, the one that made headlines, was still to come. By early 2024, the headlines were global. £7 billion drug ring used garlic shipments as cover. Dozens arrested in EU-wide sting. The media called it the Garlic Cartel. But inside courtroom walls in Madrid, London, and The Hague, the case was anything but funny. This was the biggest coordinated drug trafficking trial in Europe's recent history. And the evidence was overwhelming. Luis T, aka El Sapo, was extradited to Spain under tight security. Authorities feared retaliation or escape attempts given his prior links to armed enforcers in South America. Inside the courtroom, he remained silent for most of the hearings, refusing to answer questions unless filtered through his legal team. His defense? Denial. He claimed he was simply a logistics consultant for the Spanish produce market, that he had no knowledge of any narcotics being moved through his networks. But the evidence told a different story. Prosecutors presented the Bible ledger containing coded records of drug shipments, USB devices detailing crypto payments to cartel contacts, surveillance footage of Luis entering and leaving packing warehouses linked to drug seizures, voice messages and chat logs from Exclu Messenger discussing garlic loads going hot and Madrid onions needing to be cooled, interpreted as code for cocaine and meth shipments. One particular voice note cracked the room open. Tell the UK boys to double wrap the onions this time. Customs are starting to sniff, literally. Wiretaps, bank transfers, offshore invoices, and confessions from mid-level operatives painted a picture of a man who wasn't just involved, he was the architect. Across Europe, dozens of his co-conspirators also faced court. In London, 6 men were tried together for handling the UK leg of the network. One was a port supervisor with 19 years of experience. He'd received weekly payments of £4,000 in cash, delivered in takeout bags left outside his home. Another was a lorry driver who had made 11 cross-border trips with garlic shipments, each containing an average of £12 million worth of cocaine. In Rotterdam, Dutch prosecutors focused on the financial arm of the operation. 2 IT engineers were charged with designing the cryptocurrency laundering system. They confessed, in exchange for reduced sentences, that they were hired through darknet job forums and paid to create untraceable transaction flows. Even a logistics CEO in Belgium was arrested. She had helped create the paperwork that allowed the garlic containers to move freely through customs. Her defense? I thought it was a quirky vegetable export company. The trial dragged for months, but by March 2024, the dominoes had fallen. Over 70 convictions across 6 countries, sentences ranging from 4 to 28 years, millions in assets seized, luxury cars, crypto wallets, apartments in Marbella, even a private vineyard in Tuscany bought with laundered cash. And Luis T sentenced to 27 years in a Spanish high-security prison for drug trafficking, money laundering, and conspiracy to import controlled substances. During his final appearance in court, he spoke just one sentence: "I only moved onions. Everything else is fiction." The judge responded dryly, "Your fiction comes with 80 tons of cocaine and 70 accomplices." After the verdict, the Spanish Guardia Civil released additional footage of the raids: battering rams, flashbangs, bricks of cocaine falling from garlic crates. The public finally saw how deep the deception went. But the story didn't end there. In April, the UK's NCA announced new warrants connected to the operation, including one for a British-based financier suspected of funding the initial infrastructure for El Sapo's empire. He had since fled to Dubai. Interpol was now involved. Meanwhile, investigators in Colombia confirmed that several South American cartels had already moved to fill the void left by the garlic cartel's collapse, shifting routes to Portugal and North Africa.